Another feature that you will find handy is the reports. So that we can create or view past reports. We're going to look at trips, select the particular truck or vehicles. You can do multiple. We're going to select a date range, so let's just go for the entirety of last week. Hit OK. And you can show seconds on each trip if you want to go that advanced or to that level of detail. Trip reports usually run pretty quick. We do have a couple reports that go much slower. And this will show a summary. If you have more vehicles, it'll show each one on a separate line, and then each would have its own tab showing the number of trip or trip segments, how many miles, how long that was going, and then the average speed and maximum speed. So this is also a good way to tell if somebody in your company has a bit of a lead foot, because you would see their max speed up at, upper 70s, 80s, even 90s, depending on what kind of vehicle, and they made it back alive. We can go into the Truck 01 tab, and every single one of these, if it's within a geofence, it'll tell you the name of that geofence before the closest address it can figure out. If we want to see the start or stop of any of these, we can click that particular address, and it'll drop us into where that was. We can do that all over the place here. So you can really dive down and see to a different level of detail each trip, how long it took, and so on. We can delete report. If we hit delete, selecting the report again, we're going to delete that one off. And then there's other ones. Two other commonly used reports. If we scroll all the way to the bottom and we hit report on all events, this is where you would go in the alerts when we set to not notify us via the in-app notifications and not notify us via email. This is where you would catch those alerts. So those silent alerts you want for things like idle time, excessive speeding, and so on. This is where you would typically go to see those. I'm going to select all one of the vehicles. We still have that same date range for previous week. And we can filter out certain event types. But in this case, we just want everything. So we're going to hit build a report. Again, it runs pretty quick. And we can just see all these reports. The tracker switched on is an artifact of when the unit was first provisioned. So those are typically to be ignored, as these trackers are set to reboot every 2 to 3 days, just in order to keep them lively and fresh. We can see if somebody's been messing with the mileage counter, as we saw in the tracking window. You can set that mileage counter and sync that up with your vehicle, and the utility of that will be seen in the fleet management segment. We can see the speeding by hardware speed, gives you alerts and so on like that. If we click on the location, it'll take us to right where that was seen. And so right now, for whatever reason, that OpenStreetMaps is giving us a little bit of a trouble there, but we can zoom in using the Google Maps. It's a little more reliable, and we can see exactly, okay, that truck was moving a little hot at the time on the highway. So we go back to the whole list, see the backup battery low, the external power cut, again, provisions of having been, or excuse me, not provisions of, but back when it was being provisioned, or disconnected. Another one that we can do here is if your company does IFTA taxing, we can set it to tell how many miles it went in a given time frame, such as like per quarter, per state. And I am looking for that. If we want to go to it quickly, we're just going to type trips by state and jurisdictions. And select the truck. Let's do all month. Now this truck is pretty much just in Washington state, and we know that, but there are other companies that do interstate travel. And if you have vehicles subject to IFTA taxing, this is going to save you just gobs of time. Hit build report, and this drills down every single trip that was made with that vehicle for the given time frame, and breaks out how many miles of each trip were in each state, which is fantastic for getting the feds their information. So this usually takes some time. We've got customers in excess of 50 vehicles on these reports. It'll take up to 15 minutes for those to run. As you saw, a single vehicle was about 30 seconds with some minimal amount of actual driving. And so this is one where if you're in a hurry, you're going to need to find something to do for at least a couple minutes if this is of use to you. But we click on the state report and we can see we got one truck in one state in it. So it'll show that for this month, the entirety of the mileage was within Washington. If that vehicle had done interstate travel, it would break out by vehicle, by state, how many miles were done for each. And then we can again go back into each individual vehicle. We can see it's got a Washington section, it would have an Oregon section, and so on like that. And it shows the odometer value at the end of that time window, which would be, in the case of this one, its current value. There's a couple other reports, but these are the ones that I find most of our customers will use. There's certain ones relating to particular drivers and so on. But to be honest with you, I find this system to be a bit clunky for that. And so if you're dealing with a delivery system or something like that, we can talk about integrating this into those processes with your company. But for most companies, pretty much all the ones we have at this point, those reports that we've shown are sufficient.